Morning, everyone, and welcome to the scoreboard. All right, wickets. Come on in, wicket lovers. Here at the Wicket Twister, we're slashing our wickets in half. Give us an offer on our vast selection of wickets. This is a wickets blowout. We got full wickets, straight wickets, short wickets, seam wickets, grassy wickets, fast wickets, bouncy wickets, skinny wickets. Come on, you want a wicket? Come on in, wicket lovers. If you don't got it, you don't want it. I mean, what the hell was that? That was a lot of wickets. It was ridiculous how many wickets we actually saw there. That was a day. Let us remember how the hell we got here. India probably got the toss wrong. I know that seems like 7 years ago now, but I think it was from a good place. But Australia got the best Mitch Starc we have seen in quite a while. Hazelwood was awesome. Cummins not, but Mitch Marsh stood up and became the Cummins that we never knew he was even going to be fit enough to be. And so India went out so quickly to a bunch of shots, of late shots and indecisive shots and some good bowling as well. And of course, lots of seam movement. It was only Rishabh Pant who seemed ready to do anything, which include falling over to flick Pat Cummins over fine leg's head for 6. But India were poor. Then Australia were poorer. The faulty top 4 had just one long innings, and that was Marnus being dropped, missing everything, and then perhaps getting away with an obstructing the field. Part of this was Bumrah, because at the other end, that was fine. No one really cared. He was godlike, just absolutely perfection in the way that he bowled. Your best shot against him was just the play and miss at that point. But Rana obviously took one with a dream ball as well, and Siraj had rhythm. It was pretty good, all things considered, and it meant that also that Bumrah, when he stopped taking wickets, Head and Marsh actually went out to the other 2 guys, which could be a very important thing because those are the guys most likely to salvage what was going on. So Australia bowled out India on day 1 for 150 and is still massively behind in the game. When India failed and Kohli dropped Marnus, I was worried we were about to see like a one-sided test. But this match, it seems like one of those Dungeons and Dragons dice. You roll it and it has so many options left. Although to be fair, no matter what those options are, they still seem to end up with, more wickets.
INDvAUS helped me make this content. For detailed performance breakdowns of your game using technology and data, contact them today.
Hit Wicket is the cricket game backed by Harsha Bogle and me, so you know it's full of nerd energy. This strategic cricket game isn't just about frantic tapping. You make decisions based on how cricket actually works. You've got to set a batter up, right? And you can't hit a 6 from the first ball. Hit Wicket knows all that, and they made a game that makes it work with a few gaming twists in there as well. So play, build, and manage your team, because you are the batter, the bowler, the coach, the selector. I mean, you're basically everything in this game, right? And there's no ads on Hit Wicket. So download it for free for mobile and unleash your inner cricket legend. All right. Wow. There's a lot of inner cricket legend today. Thanks to Hit Wicket for sponsoring us. But let us get to the scoreboard. Scenes is what we had there. So we're going to try and analyze this as best we can. Let's go. I'm just trying to remember. Yeah. So this wicket generally completely falls apart. This is usually what we have seen before today. Perfect. It's not a lot of test matches, of course, but you'd see the normal average is 64.88 on day 1. That is why right here, India went, let's bat first. Because even though you knew that the wicket could be a little bit different, there'd been rain around and everything else. The chances were that what we were going to get here was something where it was going to be easier to bat on day 1 than any other day, right? That is a perfectly normal decision to make. Australia looked at the grass and also had listened to the curator maybe a little bit more carefully and thought to themselves, I don't know, maybe we're not sure, but even they I think they said they were 50-50 whether they were going to bat or bowl. So I've got it at 68. It was 64, wasn't it? But it's close enough. So 64 is how much it was usually on day 1. Today, we lost wickets at 12.76. Look, I get it. He put a little bit more grass on it, but my God, I think the average seam movement today was something around 0.9 for a long period of the day. To fully explain that, at 1 degree, seam bowling at that pace, anything over 80 miles an hour, is basically unplayable. it almost averaged that. So I've seen comments about the batting and everything else, and I heard all these things about defensive techniques. We have more than enough proof now that when the ball seems this much, it doesn't really matter who you are and what kind of form you're in. You're probably just going to be dismissed. It takes something special or something weird to even stay in for a long period of time here. So there's no doubt about that this was very, very different. And the Perth wicket in general is a bit of an outlier, but we have seen in cricket Australian cricket over a period that things are changing. So just to show exactly what I mean. Generally, in Australia, you don't get wickets falling that often. So you can see here in 2015, we had a wicket every 72 balls. We're still at a similar mark there in 2017. And you can see how much different it is than the rest of the world. We're talking about, 10, 15 balls difference at time. 2020 is the year that Kookaburra changed the ball. And so almost straight away, you see that Australia start losing wickets at the same rate that everyone else does. This year so far, Australia, and let's have a look, the rest of the world is not handling this current situation very well. But Australia is losing a wicket every 42 deliveries. And I mean Australian pitchers, not the team. That is absolutely remarkable, right? And to show that it isn't just the opposition players, this is why coming in to this series, I thought India had a very good chance. Once we saw Mohammad Shami be injured and, Hardik Pandya either not be injured or not be fit enough. I don't know. He seemed pretty fit when he was playing in South Africa, but whatever. Hardik Pandya wasn't playing. Even Kuldeep, those sorts of things. I started to think to myself, Australia would be a much better side. But this was the reason I worried about it. And if you looked at our video on how to beat Australia, on the main channel the other day, I mentioned the top four specifically. But you could just see here that no one in Australia is making any runs. We heard a lot about Smith. It's like, oh, they're, ruining by opening. He was struggling before he opened, and he struggled today back in his normal spot. The longer Marnus batted today, the worse Marnus looked today. To a certain, it was one of those perfect innings where you're just like, someone needs to put him out of his misery. Khawaja, who's been in great form over the last couple of years, or last 3 years before this one, hasn't made any runs so far this year, right? And Head's gone through a bit of a slump. And we've heard a lot about Carey's great innings against New Zealand. He's still not making a lot of runs. Marsh was the only one. And of course, he was done today by a little bit of extra bounce. The fact that Cummins is on this list and doesn't look completely out of place tells you how much Australia has been struggling. But a lot of this is due to the fact that no one is making runs in Australia. We're not making runs in first-class cricket. The opposition aren't making runs. The Australian players aren't making runs. It is very tough to bat in Australia at the moment, and everyone is struggling with it. But let's go back to the bowling. I thought this was very fascinating. I mentioned a little bit, actually not a little bit. I mentioned quite a lot that Mitchell Starc has been struggling in test bowling for quite a while now. So you can see here, 2019 and 2020 were just absolutely probably his peak. But this great period here is averaging around, 25, 22 and 26 over 3 years. Then he has the 2 great years. And then this is what's interesting is this is when the ball changes, but he does actually start to struggle. And part of the reason is he starts to try to bowl the wobble ball. He loses his swing and he loses his early wickets. Well, today he was bowling some swing, some wobble ball, some sort of traditional seam as well. But the big difference was he looked like he had a lot of extra rhythm that we haven't seen from Mitchell Starc in a long time. And he just kept hitting a length. Like again and again, he kept hitting a length. And almost from even that first ball, when it went down the leg side for 4, it just looked like a completely different bowler than we've seen in Test cricket for a while. And I know he's okay in the white ball stuff, and also know that there was that Shield game. I was expecting him to look okay. I wasn't expecting this. But it is worth pointing out, this is his 10 innings rolling average over the years. So you can see that he does find little clumps. Quite often it's, quite often it's playing Sri Lanka, if we're being honest. But you can see here over, a long period of time, he's just been a little bit more mid and up and down. He hasn't found those incredible peaks. Well, today he looked like the sort of bowler who could find one of these peaks again. But this is what I wanted to look at. This is Mitchell Starc in the first 10 overs by a venue. This is just looking at Australian wickets throughout his entire career. You can see here, at the Gabba, he doesn't do all that much. In Adelaide, in Sydney, he doesn't do much. In Adelaide, he gets the pink ball, so he's basically unplayable in those first few overs. Melbourne, again, these are fine. Anything under 30 is fine, if not elite. The Wacker, he never did anything with a new ball. He's never actually taken a wicket at Bellerive. I just put that in, but that was all the runs that he's bowled with here. And Monaco Oval, he's fine. This is him in the first 10 overs of games when he bowls at Optus Stadium. He's a different bowler here than he is like anywhere else. And that's what we saw today. The big problem, well, I should say the big problem for India, although it might be less of a problem if they win this test match. I'll get to the full story on that a little bit later on. But the big problem for India is if they do lose this test match, the next one is in Adelaide. So you'll get his two best surfaces. And I thought he was the weakest link of the bowlers coming in. And he did not feel like a weak link today. In fact, Cummins was the weakest link today. And then Mitch Marsh came in. This is Mitch Marsh's entire professional bowling this year. So you can see there's a little bit of bowling here around, I think the IPL's his last bowl. And then he comes back and he bowls in a game in England, gets injured straight away, and has to leave the field. We're then told he won't bowl in the test match. Oh, I must have updated this a bit too early because obviously he bowled a few. I think, did he only bowl 5 overs or did he bowl a few more? I think he bowled a few more. Anyway, he bowled about 3 overs in the lunch break, according to Michael Vaughan. So he did a lot. But incredible that you've got someone who hasn't bowled all year, really, or half the year, to come back and to bowl like he did. And the way that Australia used him. In the end, I think this is a much more important spell than at the time I was like, it may not matter all that much. Now it looks like a really important spell because getting rid of Dhruv Jurel, who I thought looked like their best player outside of Rishabh Pant, or the most confident player outside of Rishabh Pant. If India had got to 180 or 200 or 220, who knows what would have happened with Australia. This is seam bowlers with 25 wickets in the World Test Championship cycle. We can see here we've got Rabada, Bumrah, Matt Henry, and Josh Hazlewood. Almost all of this form, though, I believe with Josh Hazlewood, is coming in the last... Is it 8 months? No, what are we in? We're in November. So it would be what, the last 14 months, maybe 12 months? I'm trying to remember when his good form started. But he has taken a lot of wickets, and most of them have come very, very recently. And he's suddenly on a tear. So I think if you just look at his form this year, he must be averaging around 11 or 12 this year. It's ridiculous what he's done. And just to show you how brutal it's been. So you can see here, there was a period, and I've talked about this before, I think this is when he starts to take white ball cricket more seriously. And Hazlewood goes from being, a great bowler to being an average bowler for a while. He is no longer an average bowler. And there you go. What did I say before? His rolling average, his average would be around 12. Well, it's 13.69 for his, in that period. But you can just see how much better he's got over the last little while. I think Starc was the bowler I was most impressed with because I didn't expect it from Starc. I did expect it from Hazlewood. I think I've picked him absolutely every podcast, and I've been on about 100 of them. Who's going to be the best bowler in this series? I've said Hazlewood. Bumrah might still stretch me on that one, of course, now. And Bumrah, is different gravy as well. But Hazlewood just picks up so many wickets at the moment. It's ridiculous. And then the other bowler that we've been talking about, and I've been mentioning for a while now, is that Cummins hasn't quite been himself. So he had that little period where he took a lot of wickets, but overall in his last 20, 25 innings, he's just not been the bowler that he used to be. And, remember the bowler that he used to be is a guy that could average around 20 for a long period of time and well below 20. And he's just started to slip up. Today, he just looked rusty and he just overpitched. I don't think it's a huge problem, but certainly something worth having a look at for the future. All right. Jasprit Bumrah's match factor by country. So, forget the West Indies because that's a bit silly. But in the games in Australia, when Bumrah has played, he is 43% better than the other bowlers in those games. Now, it is worth remembering that in those games, Australia have had Starc, Cummins, and Hazlewood. All right, Mohammad Shami's played maybe not that many, but Mohamed Shami certainly played as well. Mohamed Siraj was bowled well. Like, he's out bowling brilliant bowlers by 43%. And he just today, from the moment he started bowling, I was like, oh, this is ridiculous. And I was saying, I was on, we do a show on TalkSport as well, me and Saurabh Samani, and I was saying over there that his new ball bowling has been his one Achilles heel, I think, so far in his career. And he's so good afterwards, it hasn't mattered all that much. But a couple of times I've seen him recently against New Zealand and now in this test where I'm just like, I feel like he's kind of worked out new ball bowling. And his ability today to just be like, I think the Australian bowlers bowled a metre too short, or a metre and a half too short, perhaps. Not that they bowled poorly, because obviously they got the conditions, but he worked out so quickly what he needed to do on this wicket. And the fact he could get LBWs on a surface like this, I just thought it was magnificent bowling and the ability to be able to do that. And it was beautiful again. And then to almost finish the day with that wicket as well. This is his rolling average. So he's already had some pretty good peaks, and it feels like he's on the way towards another one as well. But realistically, he's only ever had this one, I was going to say bad period, but it's very unfair to call it bad period. But he's had this one average period, and then everything else has just been absolutely brilliant in his career so far, pretty much from the beginning all the way through. We're seeing something so special here, and you know that I'm going to make another video on the main side about him, because I'm going to have to. And maybe it will all be about the new ball bowling and what he's doing now that he hasn't done before. But Jasprit Bumrah was already the best all-format bowler in the world, and I just think we watched him upskill as well. Just remarkable scenes there from him. This is touring fast bowlers in Australia, minimum 25 wickets. So he's on the level with, where are we? Ambrose, Barnes, and Hadley. And, you know, Hadley took 9 wickets in an innings, kind of bowled on his own, was absolutely brilliant. Ambrose in Australia was probably at his absolute best. And, you know, if you looked at the video where I was talking about how rarely Australia lost at home, Ambrose was caused a lot of their losses at home during their peak period. And then you got Sydney Barnes, who has, you know, the lowest bowling average of anyone of over 150 wickets or whatever the marker is. And very soon, if Jasprit Bumrah passes 200 wickets, we'll take Barnes off that board, and Jasprit Bumrah will have the lowest bowling average of any player ever. And you can see other Indian seamers in here. Kapil Dev wasn't a bad bowler in Australia at all, right? Mohamed Shami's averaging just over 30. You've got Ajay Agarkar up here. Ishant Sharma, who came over when he was young. And Moose Yadav, who came over when he was young as well. At the moment, Bumrah is significantly better than Kapil Dev, and if he keeps bowling the way he is with these Kookaburra balls, you know, good luck. This is what I was talking about with how he worked out this wicket today. This is the Steve Smith wicket, which, you know, pitches here and it's going to hit leg stump. So the angle and the seam back was just absolutely extreme. But he just went fuller, and then look how many balls are like on that one spot. He just absolutely nailed. And I reckon, and this is what you can start to see with him. There's like, he's so accurate and so skillful when he wants to be, that you start to see like micro patterns with his bowling sometimes. I think this is the one for the LBW, and this is the one for the caught behind, caught in the cordon. Just brilliant control to be able to go between those two as well. And this is a Bumrah on day one, bowling so full, but not full enough that the Australians felt comfortable to drive him or anything. And instead, he just kept the stumps in play absolutely brilliantly. And you can see here, it's got the 1 wicket from the back of... I call back of a length, marginally back of a length, I suppose, isn't it? That's around, I would say that's about, 6.4? No, that's 6, isn't it? So it's about 7.2. So in the old days, that would still be seen as good length, but we've changed what a good length is over the last couple of years. So that's still not massively back of a length, just absolutely brilliant bowling there. And that's our analysis of the day. because this was absolutely just a brilliant, brilliant day of Test cricket. I enjoyed, and remember, I'm waking up at 2:20. I need to take you through my narrative for a minute. I'm waking up at 2:20 in the morning for this, right? And I wake up, and Mitchell Starc's bowling good, so I'm energized. I like it when the opening bowlers are bowling well. And then in India, and then Mitch Marsh takes wickets, and at that stage, I kind of lose energy because now I'm like, oh god, now we're going to be in a situation where we're going to, Australia's going to roll them out for 130 or 140, and India will drop a catch or two. And I think I said it in the intro, when Kohli dropped that catch, I was like, oh, okay. Marnus is going to scrap around for 30, and then Head or Mitch Marsh is going to slog some away, and Australia's going to get a lead, and then, roll India cheaply. And then you start to, it's a bit like the Adelaide test all those years ago. And you start to go, oh God, if they lose this test, and then what's going to happen next? And you can't help yourself. If you're following it and you're getting up at 2:20 in the morning, unless you're like the biggest massive fan of a team, you kind of want the first test to at least be a contest, right? You want it to feel like anything could happen. And at the start of the day, I did not feel like anything could happen. I felt the opposite. And then as the day went on, I definitely felt like anything could happen. And this was like, the only issue we have now is that it might be a 2-day test. Probably not going to be 2 days. I think the pitch will flatten out a little bit, but it might be a 2.5-day test. And fair play to the curator. He tried to fix an issue they have at that ground, which was that it's been impossible to bat further on in the test match, and it's been really easy to bat on day one. We certainly changed that. Whether he's changed it for the better, we'll have to see tomorrow. But it's been fascinating so far. That's the first part of the scoreboard done. Don't worry. Don't go anywhere. We're all cool here. We're going to take a quick break, and then I can see there's already a bunch of super chats and everything else in there. So we'll take a quick break here, and we'll be back with your questions here on the scoreboard. I'm Jared Kimber, and we do this after every day's play.
Hit Wicket is the cricket game backed by Harsha Bogle and me, so you know it's full of nerd energy. This strategic cricket game isn't just about frantic tapping. You make decisions based on how cricket actually works. You've got to set a batter up, right? And you can't hit a six from the first ball. Hit Wicket knows all that, and they made a game that makes it work with a few gaming twists in there as well. So play, build, and manage your team, because you are the batter, the bowler, the coach, the selector. I mean, you're basically everything in this game, right? And there's no ads on Hit Wicket. So download it for free for mobile and unleash your inner cricket legend.
All right. Oh, Girish says, it's tough being a batter these days with pitches everywhere being made to suit a specific bowling skill. I think batters everywhere are struggling. Yeah, I think you have to separate it, Girish, a little bit, because India, it's obviously ragging sideways, and that's done on purpose. And South Africa is up and down and sideways sometimes, and that's done on purpose. This was supposed to make this pitch a better batting pitch. I mean, this has always been a bowling pitch so far. I've never been to Perth Stadium. When I think I said on that preview, I was supposed to go. So it looks like a great stadium from outside, but I don't know much about it. But, reading the curator comments and everything about it and following test matches there so far, they clearly have a problem with the surface cracking. And obviously, anyone who's ever followed cricket in Western Australia will know that happens, right across Western Australia. The wickets are just so hard that eventually they crack, and because of the pace and the bounce and everything else, they become really hard to bat on. You're looking at, some of the graphics I was showing you before. I think it was on day 5, and we haven't had many day 5s because it's been such a bowling pitch. It's something like the average has been 13 or something. So it really is tough on this. And so you had a situation where I think what the curator was trying to do is put more moisture in the wicket, keep it a little bit greener, which meant that he was expecting it probably to do a little bit more on day 1 and then flatten out on days 2, 3, and 4. It might still flatten out on days 2, 3, and 4. It probably won't matter because we're not getting to that. So these things happen. But I am not blaming the pitches. The ball is the big difference, right? Because as I showed before, it's right across the world, and it's specifically in Australia. Kookaburra have put extra lacquer on the ball. They've reinforced that seam. I don't know if you could see, I can't remember if it was Mark Waugh or someone else said, you could still see the writing on the Kookaburra ball after 25 overs. That is not how, I've used Kookaburra balls most of my career. I don't remember the lacquer staying on them in the way that they do now. The balls are juiced, right? And we're seeing that everywhere. And also, harder cricket balls is helping spinners in some situations. Not India. SG's slightly different, obviously, again. But yeah, it's tough to be a batter right now. There's no doubt. I heard a lot of things about defensive technique isn't as strong as it used to be, and all this sort of stuff. When you're facing Jasprit Bumrah and Josh Hazlewood, and the ball is seaming at 1 degree, there's not much you can do other than be dismissed. That is literally what is supposed to happen. That would have happened to old-time cricketers as well as new cricketers. That is just how the game is played. At that pace, with that much lateral movement, you're kind of stuck. All right. Gersh's got another one. How is Bumrah able to have access to all those bowling options from that actions? It's confounding. It's basically about the wrist, isn't it? You know, his action is weird, but when he gets to that final position, his wrist is just so absolutely perfect at that point. Some of the super slow-mos, I was watching with Ezekiel, new star of this channel, Ezekiel Kimber. Don't worry, we'll have a video up with him in a couple of days. In fact, we might wait for it now. We can put it up at the end of the test. We're going to play it during the test. But yeah, I was showing him because there were some really good slow-mos. Just have a look at that, and have a look also at the amount of backspin he gets on the ball when he wants to. His control of each individual delivery is just incredible. It's so hard for me every time I watch him bowl not to do another video on him, just because I feel like I'm learning something new because he's upskilling all the time. Absolutely remarkable cricketer. ABCDEF says, is Bumrah the best bowler to ever tour Australia? Well, look, he's getting to a point where he might be the first. Well, he might end up with the lowest bowling average of any bowler over 200 wickets, right? What did Sydney Barnes get? Was it 160 odd? Yeah, so we're already getting to a point with him where Barnes got 189. Okay, so yeah, he needs to go over 190. If he gets over 200 wickets at an average of under 20, then it's hard to go away from that. Now, there are caveats to this. This isn't it. A lot of Bumrah's career has come in a great bowling era, and I always said the same for Cummins as well. Cummins kind of missed the bad batting era altogether because he was injured, and then came back in as a fully fledged bowler and absolutely dominated. That doesn't mean that Cummins wouldn't have been a great bowler in any era, because he clearly would have, but we also have to factor that in when we start to look at things like that. Bumrah doesn't have great home wickets, but for a seam bowler, but that doesn't really matter to him because of his skill set. So again, he's played in a really good era for bowlers and everything else. But Malcolm Marshall bowled in a really good era for bowlers. Sydney Barnes bowled in a fantastic era for bowlers. So you really have to go through deep. I still don't have the answer to who's the greatest bowler of all time, just because I haven't looked into it. If everyone buys my book, The Art of Batting, which is out on Amazon, available on Amazon at the moment, for pre-order, I think if you buy that book, enough people buy that book, I will be able to do the book on bowling. But it's trickier bowling. You know, there's so many things. How do you factor in? Oh, there you go. Bumrah has the 21st best match factor for fast bowlers with minimum 150 wickets. I'm surprised it's that low. That's a really interesting. Thanks, Varun, for that. But yeah, so I think it's much harder for bowlers, because how do you compare fast bowlers to spin bowlers and opening bowlers to first change bowlers and everything else? But the answer is always to that question, ABCD, Joel Garner. Curtly Ambrose might still be the bowler that is most suited to the Australian conditions. And obviously Barnes and Hadley, as we saw on the graph, were also great. I mean, if you're being mentioned in a list of, who have I mentioned there? Marshall, Garner, Barnes, Hadley, and Ambrose, like, you know. So says, is this the most difficult batting era post uncovered pitches? Yeah, but most uncovered, even it's more difficult than most eras that included uncovered pitches. The 1930s was uncovered pitches, I think, everywhere. I'm not sure if Australia had started to switch by that point. I know they did after the war. They might have started to switch before the war as well. But that was uncovered pitches, and we had Bradman and Headley and Hammond and Sutcliffe. Right? We had 4 of the greatest run scorers of all time. It was a very high scoring era. So uncovered pitches and I've said this a lot. Uncovered pitches on their own are not bad for batting. Uncovered pitches that get wet are impossible to bat on. But yes, I would say this is the toughest era for batting since the 1910s, all things considered, which is why we're seeing shots like Rishabh Pant falling over and flicking the ball today and charging down the wicket and everything else. We are seeing a very big change in the game at the moment. A new delivery. And even, I've been thinking about this a lot too. When you're watching the spinners, so DRS has changed the way that spin has bowled, but also spinners are not showing the seam as much as they used to in the old days. They're bowling a lot of scrambled seam themselves. We don't really, think about it the same way, but that's taken over. So you now don't get some of the clues that you used to get. Spinners are faster. So spinners are faster, more accurate, and have this huge LBW advantage that they've never had before. Fast bowlers are bowling more pitched up, which is generally more dangerous. They've got this ball that's really hard to play for everyone. So there's all these different things happening at the same time. And plus there should be, I don't want to discount the whole defensive technique thing, because it's clearly an issue because we're hearing batters talk about it as well. I don't think it was always an issue today, although there were some weaker shots, and on a normal day I would have done a lot more analysis on some of the other shots, especially the Indian shots. I'd written some pieces on them, but by the end of the day it didn't matter, so we might hold that for other shows in case it happens back to back, or we see a trend with those players. But when it comes down to it, there is a reason why Bazball has happened. There is a reason why younger batters are attacking. Some of that is the natural evolution of the game. Some of that is it is so hard to score in Test match cricket at the moment. Spin bowling has had a dip in its average, and pace bowling has had a massive dip in its average. There isn't a third kind of bowling. That was so hard, wasn't it? Arun says, collective brain fade by batters on both sides. I don't think it was. So you've got two Indian batters went out early, Jaiswal and Padikkal. Both of them were beaten a little bit by the extra pace of the wicket. So that is something that if you're playing your first test in Perth is normal. You can see neither of their feet were set, right? I think there are more conversations to be had about both of those batters, but they weren't brain fades. Kohli was on the front foot and edged off. You look at the history of subcontinental batters in Australia, very common that happens to them in the first innings, and they don't usually play their first test at the Wacker. Well, not the Wacker, but Perth Stadium, Western Australia. So the first three wickets there were like that. You then had, some very, nibbling around bowling from Mitch Marsh. I don't think there was any brain fades in that. And Australia's batting, I'm trying to think of all the different wickets there. You had some balls sliding on a little bit to McSweeney and to Smith. Again, there's not a lot of brain fades in that. When you have seam movement like this, Aaron, it is so hard to bat. And we always have to remember that. We're too quick to throw batters under the bus. I don't know how you face some of the deliveries that we saw today. Honestly, I just don't know how you face them. Suryant says, appalling batting, technical flaws with most players in both teams. Discussed to here on air as two best teams. Maybe New Zealand, Sri Lanka beat both of these teams at Optus. Well, remember, New Zealand were pretty poor for a long time. Sri Lanka have been quite an interesting cricket team for 3 years now? It wasn't. I don't think there were. There were technical flaws, yes. But if the ball's seaming 0.9 degrees, you're going to get technical flaws. That's how these things work, mate. That's why people aren't making a lot of runs in world cricket. We have worked out how to make the ball seam consistently and for longer through the Kookaburra's changes, through the wobble ball, and through understanding aerodynamics and everything a little bit more, and backspin and things like that. I think there's a lot of things at play. We see more seam movement now consistently than we ever have before. And because of that, we also have faster bowlers than ever before. People are going to have days when they don't make any runs. It wasn't that long ago we were all complaining. If you look up until 2017, we had a record amount of runs, right? A lot of these are the same batters. So have they forgotten how to bat, or has something else changed? I don't think they've all forgotten how to bat. Rahul says, Kohli could end up with the same average as Khawaja. And they will have gotten there in such incredibly divergent ways. Rahul. That's what's fascinating to me. I think we've got a piece kind of saved for Kohli. We've actually got 2 pieces on Kohli that we might write during this series. They're very, very interesting, and in the way that they kind of they might overlap a little bit, but it depends on where Kohli goes in this series and everything else, and what we want to do. We might even do both of them. We might only do one. But the truth is that Kohli is basically, for 6 or 7 years, just had a peak that was one of the best peaks we've ever seen. Khawaja has peak, trough, peak, trough, peak, trough, whereas Kohli was like slow, better than anything, and then slow. So if they end up with the same averages, they will have done this game in a completely different way. But remember that Khawaja was dropped, was out of the side, had to force his way back in. When he was struggling, he wasn't out in the middle. There's a huge difference between someone who averages 47 in Test cricket, who plays consistently from a young age to an old age, someone who averages 47 in Test cricket, who comes in and out the side, maybe plays when they're in form, doesn't play when they're not in form, and all those sorts of things. Huge difference between those two. That's why averages on their own only tell you so much. Agro says, are Australian conditions the new pre-Bazball era of England, considering excessive seam movement on the pitches and the extra lacquer on their ball? Well, the extra lacquer's on most of the balls because it's Kookaburra. So you are seeing it around the world. It's not just an Australian thing. I actually think that the lacquer isn't changing things all that much, although it is a little bit. I think it's the fact that having a pronounced seam on a hard Australian wicket, and I think it took the bowlers a little while to work out just how deadly that was. And that's why we see the rise of Scott Bolins, right? Those sorts of bowlers who beforehand weren't particularly... Scott Boland was a fine working bowler beforehand, and now he's just, deadly. And so I do think that is a part of it. We have seen Australian wickets, I don't think, are as flat as they used to. So I do think in Australia it's a combination of a couple of things. I think that's probably fair to say. And you probably need to pair, and if Kookaburra aren't going to change their ball, I kind of don't want them to. Just because at least the ball's better than it used to be. But if Kookaburra aren't going to change the ball, then I think a few countries around the world might just have to look at just being like, okay, so how do we redress this balance and take it from there? Ram Krishnan says, felt for cow roll. Yeah, sorry, we haven't even got to that. I mean, that was one of the things. I was like, halfway through the day, I was like, here's 400 words on this story I can't wait to write. And of course, by the end of the day, I'm like, did cow roll, did he play today? Even Kettleborough was stunned by the third umpire's decision. There was a noticeable pause before he announced it on field. I think there's a few different things here. I don't want to get on another third umpires should be specialists, but third umpires should be specialists. We all know how I feel about that. I've said it many times before. I'm so sick and tired of this. The first angle that we were shown, and I think I was told that the World feed and the Channel 7 feed was slightly different. I don't know if that's true, but someone told me that it was. But there were other angles that we didn't see that did show it looking slightly more out. But we also didn't get the commentary from the umpire, so we don't even know 100%. Or was that the one that we did get the commentary from the umpire? Actually, that might have been the one we did. There was a couple of times today when we didn't get the commentary from the umpire. There was obviously a problem there. But that first angle where you've got the snicko being shown, and you've got an angle where you can only see the edge and you can't see where the rest of the bat is, when my first thought was, oh, I think there's two noises, but he's definitely hit his pad. That was my first thought watching it. So I put money on India when that happened because I thought it was... I put money on that when it happened because the market thought it was going to get given out. And I thought, well, it's not going to get given out. And in the end, the market agreed with me and then it was given out. So I was ahead of the market, and I was behind the market, and I was sideways to the market. But the point being is that you have a situation there where, again, not the right camera angles were shown. We didn't see enough camera angles. It wasn't shown from the right distance, from the right area. The third umpire may have had other footage that we didn't see. And I don't know whether they did or not. And I think Simon Torfel said that the right decision was made. Even if that's true, we didn't see any of that, and it didn't feel like it. But again, it didn't look like to me that there was enough information there to overrule that. But mistakes happen, right? I've got no problem with a third umpire making a mistake or an umpire on the field making mistakes. My issue still comes back to the fact that it seems from the outside we're not getting the best information to the third umpires because they don't know what to ask for because they only do it a third of the time. It is a completely different job. We just need to make third umpires specialists. Yeah, and sorry, this was the other one. True Indian Motivation says 80 cameras. They mentioned the amount of cameras quite a lot today. Also, they kept talking about the what was it? What's it called? The Fox Halo. And then on the world feed, we never saw it. It was like they forgot to show us the clips for ages before we started seeing it. Oh, a quick one on the Halo. So I put this in the Discord today. But in 2012, I think it was 2012, maybe it was 2013, I came up with something called Wicket Time. And it was based on watching The Matrix too many times, where I was like, if in The Matrix we can stop time with bullet time and go around, we should be able to do it in professional sports. And so we looked into it. I think Philip Brown was involved. I think Sam Collins, my friend Anthony, who's a camera person as well. We looked into it. Our problem was we knew that this Fox Halo technology would be great, but it was so hard to do because we needed still cameras. And so we needed, I can't remember how many we worked out, but we needed minimum like 20 to 30 still cameras was our guess. But also you need long lenses, and the lenses cost more than the cameras, right? And we just couldn't get it. And then we needed the software to be able to render it all quickly and bring it all together. And unfortunately for us, we never got around to do it. But I'm so happy that that technology exists, and I really enjoy it. And I've seen it in the cricket before the Halo one. There was another version. This just looks so much better. So yeah, we do have a lot of cameras and everything else. But I'm not sure why we're saying that the Aussies are the best cheaters. Aussies missed a caught behind down the leg side today as well. Like, it's just nonsense. That's why. Sometimes just nonsense. Somebody says, Barnes was so skillful because he was literally a spin bowler who bowled medium fast. Is Bumrah the closest thing to Barnes in terms of skill? I mean, Mustafiza and Bob Appleyard are probably more like Barnes as bowlers than Bumrah. Bob Appleyard obviously has a ridiculous record, but his body fell apart and I was going to say his mind, but no, it was his body, wasn't it? He was ill and he was injured and everything else. But Bob Appleyard is perhaps the most fascinating cricketer that we never saw enough of. It's a great Stephen Chalk book, I think, on Bob Appleyard that is worth having a look at. So Bumrah's different, but it comes from a similar position. It's why I think, Samid, if you go back to one of the videos I did on Bumrah, and that's not narrowing it down, but I compare them in that they are combining a lot of different skills. And I think in Bumrah's case, what he's really combining is the ability to bowl with a rubber ball and the ability to bowl with a seam-up ball. And it wasn't Akram had that, but wasn't Akram's was more swing dependent and reverse swing dependent, whereas Bumrah can swing the ball, he can seam the ball conventionally, he can reverse swing the ball, he can wobble ball, he can bowl slower balls at a top level, and he has more control over the ball than Wasim Akram does. He's not left arm, and probably, in his era, not quite as quick as Akram was in his era. But so we've seen he probably just has a few extra skills that someone like Akram has, which gets him up to that sort of Barnes level. But yeah, they're different kinds of bowlers. I mean, there haven't been many bowlers like Sid Barnes before. But yeah, I think it's a good comp in general. And there's a reason why those are the two guys at the top of the list as well. It's not an accident when you have that many different skills available to you. Shree says, comment on Roll's decision. Oh, I've already done that one, haven't I? Did I do that one? And is it fair to criticize batting on a day with 17 wickets? And how do you go about judging batting on this week? I think I've answered all of those, Shree. Comment on Rahul's decision, I've definitely done. I wouldn't have given it out, but I still think he may have hit it, by the way. And I still wouldn't have given it out. But I definitely wouldn't have given it out on the footage that we saw. I saw straight away that the bat had hit the pad live, I think. And so maybe I was more furious than everyone else because I knew that noise could be bat on pad. So we'll move that one aside. Is it fair to criticize batting on a day with 17 wickets? It's fair to criticize batting on any day. Like, if you think the batting is poor, go back to the test match when India were dominating England, the first test of the Bazball series in India. I was I was criticizing the way that India gave away all their wickets, even though they were in a position of strength. They still ended up, in a really bad position in that game because of that. But at the time, it probably looked a little bit like I was picking on players for no reason. You can criticize batters on any particular days. And how do you go about judging batting on this wicket? I think the only player we've seen who's looked comfortable on this wicket has been a player who plays in a non-traditional manner, which is Rishabh Pant, which tells you that you just can't let people bowl at you and you have to find a way. That is what Virat Kohli was trying to do, to be fair. I'm trying to think of anyone else. But yeah, there were probably other batters who were trying to do that as well, but Rishabh Pant came up from it. It's just tough. It's just so tough. Soham says, first down batters today scored 2 of 75. I mean, that tells you something, right? And also, I don't think Devdutt Padikal's technique is perfect, but he's not got a bad defensive technique. I think he plays too many balls outside the line of off stump that he probably doesn't have to. That's getting picky if you want to go back to classic like number 3s or something. And Marnus, and both of them have a good temperament. Both of them are defense-first players. And they just couldn't get away. Doesn't that tell you quite a bit? Like, it's all well and good for people to go, oh, no one has a good technique to defend anymore. Well, the 2 guys who actually were most set up to do this could not score on this wicket at all. It's a great stat, by the way. So, Upit says, the problem with Indian fans is that we want to admonish our batting today, but now have to include Australian batters also. They did well. I think that's funny. I was saying at one stage, where, it's a bit like when it looked like KL Rahul was going to make some runs today, right? But before, the DRS got him and the caught behind, whatever happened in that one. And I was thinking, if he makes runs today, no one else does. What's the story then? So Indian fans have been spared that. They haven't had to worry about that. But in every other way, you make a really good point up. And I think. Was it on the preview show we did with Bayram? I think I said a lot of people talking about how India aren't making any runs, Australia aren't making any runs. They haven't been making any runs for a long time, and their top 4 is really, really weak, out of form. However you want to look at it, right? And we saw that today. We just didn't know how good Bumrah could be and how much he could be backed up. Well, today he was that man, and he got backup. Saurabh, just ordering the book like an absolute madman while we're live here. Getting delivered in May. Enjoy it. What did you make of Harshit Rana? I thought his best ball was really good. I like what he does with his. He falls away a little bit at the crease, which, if he can control that and he knows what he's doing, I think is fine. I love his athleticism. He has this sort of snap at the end. He's going to bowl some bad balls, and so he's going to go up against Marsh and Head, maybe even Carey. They're probably the main ones, right? That are going to cause they're just going to capitalize on his mistakes, and I think that's the best way of putting it, right? That doesn't mean he can't get wickets, but they might. If Siraj is bowling like he is now all the way through the tour, and I think we all know Siraj, it probably will be up and down, but if he's bowling the way he is right now, perhaps the better bowler, maybe what they want to do is go, well, Siraj can give us control and Bumrah can give us control. Let's go all in with control, because Australia, especially in that top 4, don't really have anyone who can upset that, is a way of looking at it. But the other way of looking at it is we have a genuine strike bowler and we have 2 other guys in control, and you have that sort of Jimmy Anderson, Stuart Broad, Stephen Finn, that Dale Steyn, Vernon Philander, Morne Morkel type setup, right? Not everyone always likes that, but it can certainly help with that sort of stuff as well. But thank you very much for ordering the book. Dhruv says, what role did the wobble team to play in today's shit show? I haven't gone through there were so many wickets. If it's 12 wickets or 8 wickets, I can go through the footage and have a look. Sometimes I do on days like this to have a look at just how many deliveries were wobble ball. There were quite a few though. There were some very noticeable ones. So it always plays a part. I don't think there's a test bowling attack in the world that doesn't have a wobble ball specialist. Most bowlers can bowl it. I was really interested in the fact that Mitchell Starc was bowling it a little bit more today, and he did very well. So it's just a constant thing all the way through. So no doubt that it played a part. But today I think the pace played a part. I think this is the kind of surface with that little bit of extra grass that conventional seam was fine. And I saw a couple of guys going for conventional seam. We saw Starc try and swing it a little bit. I don't think anyone else really tried to swing it, did they? I don't think so. I think everyone else was trying to hit the deck today, which makes sense anyway. It's more common now, and if you see grass on the wicket, you're probably more likely to try and seam it rather than swing it. But yeah, always plays a part. And what the wobble ball does compared to a normal seam delivery is if you're just bowling seam up over and over again, you flatten the seam quite quickly. Even this kookaburra ball, you will flatten the seam a lot quicker if you just hit the seam again and again and again. So it means that you have more exaggerated seam for a short period of time, and then it becomes easier to bat. The genius of the wobble ball is that you might only seam 1 in 3 deliveries. So you go straight, seam in, straight, seam out, which means you're not hitting the seam as much and you're not flattening away, and you're also setting the batters up more by bowling the straight ones. So it's a little bit more like when we talk about natural variation with spinners, right? Of if the spinner doesn't know which way it's going to go, that's a huge difference. And that's kind of what it does. Anyway, one day I'll get around to my epic piece on wobble balls. But today is not that day. Thank you very much for everyone coming over. A great fun day of cricket. We'll be doing this every day of the series. I'm over at Talksport as well, doing some stuff there with Saurabh Samani, so you can go over there. We may, let's see how I pull up. But obviously, I'm working overnights in the UK covering this because I was supposed to be out for this test and the next test, but I couldn't end up making it. Because I'm in the UK, I have about 40 minutes to kill in the middle of the day where I've either got to clean the house or I've got to have a small nap. And I can't nap because, especially if the cricket's been good. So we're looking at perhaps doing a show tomorrow at the lunch break. So if you see one, pop over. We may only do it for a couple of times. It may not work. It may not, I may not find it that interesting. But tomorrow, there's a very big chance that I will be sat here for the lunch break doing Good Areas Morning Glory. But that's all that we have available for today's show. Like, subscribe, comment, do all those things. They help us so much. I want to thank everyone. The comments were absolutely bumping today. Unfortunately, I could only take the super chats and a couple of other comments just because there was so much there. But know that I love all of you equally. And say hi to your mum for me. You should always say hi to your mum. You should say hi to your mum regardless. But you should certainly say hi to your mum for me personally.
I have a book out with Abhishek Mukherjee, and it is called Overthrowing Cricket's Empire. And it's about the stories of how each team beat England for the first time. We go all the way back to the demon Fred Spofforth getting annoyed at W.G. Grace for acting a little bit like Alex Carey. And then we come all the way to present times with Rashid Khan's England's redemption. We cover every single team to beat England in a major international, but we also talk about the incredible stories, like the barefoot basher from Fiji that almost played for New Zealand. In fact, this book is full of tales like that, like how Pakistan lost a top batter after he was on the run from an angry husband of a movie star he was having an affair with, and also how one future captain of his nation realised he might have to go out and bat at Lords and that he didn't own his own pads. Cricket was used as a tool by the empire, but what happens when those nations grow up and get good at it? Find Overthrowing Cricket's Empire on Amazon today.